If I've said it once, I've said it 413 times. Your Lord is the most important unit on the battlefield. They need to stay alive. Sounds like common sense, right? But it's amazing how many noobs charge their Lord around with reckless abandon, throwing them into situations and conflicts that they really shouldn't be in, often resulting in the death of the Lord. If you ever watch any pro tournaments or any pro matches, you'll notice that their lords are very often the last thing left alive because they know the importance of keeping said lord in one piece. So no longer can you underestimate the value of your leader. So there's lots of powerful lords in Warhammer which can be very exciting for a player to have at their disposal. But just because you're the Emperor of the Empire of Man doesn't mean you're invincible. And you bleed just like every other lord, and things can turn bad for you just as quickly as they can for any other unit. So they must be careful. They're supposed to be alive to lead the army, which they can't do very well if they're dead or routed. Your lord provides many benefits to help your army succeed and win the battle. They will encourage your troops. Imagine you're in a battle and you see your leader fighting alongside you. You'll be inspired to fight. Now imagine that you see your leader running away from the battle, leaving the rest of you for dead. Do you think you'll still want to keep fighting? Probably not. And of course, lords are very powerful. Whether in melee or with magic, they can do a lot of damage to the enemy. And this also ties in to the support they provide to the rest of your army, helping to even the odds in matchups that may not be favourable to your units. Now, what happens if your lord dies, flees the battlefield, or is shattered? Well, all that lovely stuff goes away and is replaced by a whole bunch of stuff you don't want. Like no more support for the rest of your army. They're on their own now. It's also all about wasted money. Much like every other unit in Total War, you need to get the most out of the money you've paid for the lord. If they die early to mid-game, you're probably not going to get that. And the worst downside of all, the leadership penalty that is incurred by the rest of your army. It's minus 16 for about the first minute after the lord is gone, which then goes down to minus 10 leadership for the rest of the battle. So that's a permanent debuff to your army's leadership, your entire army's leadership, for the remainder of the battle. And that is freaking huge. You might not see the effects of it at the start or midpoint of a battle, but by the time you get to the late game, boy are your units going to struggle to hang in there, especially if you're a low leadership faction. This penalty alone should be enough to make you take the safety of your lord seriously. Now, in order to protect our lord, we first need to understand them. What kind of lord are they, and what kind of threats are dangerous to them? Are they a big slow lumbering target like Durthu here, who's bound to get shot up by missiles and who can't really get away from anything? What kind of lord am I bringing, and how well can the enemy faction deal with said lord? Is my lord on foot? Is he on a horse? Is he on a large mount? Is he flying? How can that exploit the enemy weaknesses or avoid their strengths? For example, you may not want to bring a foot lord against the vampire counts because they've got a lot of strong lords and heroes, strong flying units, they've got summons. It'll be very difficult for your lord to get away from all those threats. But if you bring a foot lord against the dwarfs, well, you don't really have to worry about anything being able to catch you because they've all got tiny legs. So the first thing to consider is how well that your specific lord is going to do against the specific enemy faction. Now let's take a look at some of the main potential threats to all lords, starting with ranged units of all kinds, whether that's lords or heroes with giant bows and massive damage, missile infantry or skirmish cav or chariots, anything that has a missile attack basically that can pump damage into your lord from afar. Sniping artillery. These can be incredibly dangerous for large lords as they can put a lot of damage out over long ranges. And lastly, your wizards. With magic missile spells or leech spells, anything that can take health off your lord is a danger. Any of these units alone or in combination can be a big threat to your lord, especially if they're a large target, which most lords are to some degree. The next big threat, single entity units, such as lords, heroes and large monsters. This is pretty much when two entities or more team up on your one entity, your lord, and try to pour a lot of damage into them quickly. This could be a goon squad where 3 characters specifically come after the lord, or it may just happen naturally with a lord and say a large monster see an opportunity to get after the enemy lord. Either way, you've got to watch out for it because it can be incredibly dangerous. Next, a simple one, matchups. Putting your Sorceress Wizard Lord in a fight with Nakai the Wanderer only really ends one way. That is a bad matchup for the Sorceress, and she should never have taken it, so don't put her in that situation. And that goes for any kind of unit on the battlefield. You wouldn't put your single large monster fighting the elite anti-large unit Blackguard of Naggarond. So why is your large lord fighting them? Keep them out of bad matchups to keep them alive. There's also various forms of traps to watch out for, typically in the form of net spells or speed reduction spells. These could catch your lord by surprise and get you in a really bad situation really damn quickly. You may end up surrounded, trapped by a million troops, and inevitably screwed. These kind of traps can come from lords, heroes, or just specific units. You're going to have to learn them to know who to watch out for. And for a note on foot lords, not that they're a threat to your lord necessarily, it's more about the threats that they face, which is pretty much everything because they're so immobile. Honestly, you don't see foot lords used that often, and with good reason. They're just too vulnerable to being shot by things, they can't get out of range quick enough, they can't run away from goon squads, so it's pretty much the standard that if your lord has some kind of mount option available, you should at least take the cheapest one, at least. Because foot lords can be a risky business, like the vampire example I gave earlier. But don't worry, it's not that I'm saying you should never ever bring a foot lord, it's just that they're going to need some support, which we will get to in a minute. And the same with flying lords to an extent. Don't get me wrong, flying lords are great, but against certain factions they could be a bad idea. For example, like I said, vampire counts lots of strong flying units, so if you bring a flying lord, you better be prepared to fight in the air or to be running away for the entire battle because they've got air superiority. Same thing if you fight the wood elves or the high elves, they've got strong air units, so you better either just stay out of the air or really commit to the air fight. However, if you were facing the Skaven or Greenskins for example, who have little to no air units, you probably don't really need to worry about that too much. So now knowing the main threats to your lord, how can we protect them? Well, your first defense is going to be your own awareness of the situation and the enemies around you. Take a look at the enemy army and see what's a threat. Alariel is here on an eagle. She might team up with the Phoenix to double up on Throg. There's a bad single entity matchup. There's missile units that could shoot him. While he's not huge, he still is pretty big and shootable because he's on foot. The Fireborn, anti-large cav, they could also be a threat to Throg. So I know what to watch out for, and I can plan units to support him accordingly. So it's just about opening your eyes and seeing where bad situations might come from. If you charge your large lord in front of a bunch of missile units, you can rest assured they're probably all going to turn to face you and to blast the crap out of you, so you probably shouldn't stay there. If you're playing against the Skaven and you see that Deathmaster Snitch is on the field, you know his game is destroying enemy characters, so you better be very careful, because if he gets near you, nets you, well, it could be game over. It's the awareness to know that he's someone you don't want to tangle with and that he might be trying to sneak up on your lord. It's having the awareness to see a light wizard on the field and to expect them to try and trap you with him and then blast you with missiles. So you'll probably want to stay out of range until those missiles or the light wizard is dealt with. The point here is that you can learn a lot of your enemy's intentions by looking at the units they have on the field. You just need a bit of awareness to see their plans coming. When it comes to all the ranged threats out there like artillery, the simple solution is to stay out of range. This may sound like a simple and obvious one, but it's amazing how many people charge their lords in even when there's artillery blasting away at them. And the same goes for missile units. You can see their firing arc and where they can hit you, so simply stay out of it. So you can use your awareness at the start of a battle, check the enemy army and see what threats they've got to your lord. If they've got artillery, well, you probably want to be staying out of range, because of all the units you have that come into range of these, they will probably pick your lord to fire at. And realise that there's absolutely nothing wrong with leaving your lord out of the fight for a while if necessary. They can just stay out the way until those threats to them are dealt with, and then they can come in and do their work. Unless you've got a game plan that really relies on your lord being up with the front line. But for the most part, avoiding combat is usually the way to go. Wait till the threats are dealt with, and then send in your lord. Now for one to help us escape those single entity threats. The good old pull through. When you see a goon squad converging on your location, you are gonna need some help. The best hope of evading this is to find some nearby friendly units and to run through them. Your lord will be able to pass through the unit no problem, while the enemy will get stuck on them, allowing you to escape. Something like monstrous infantry, which is higher mass, can be great for this, like these ice trolls here, so that the enemy can't push their way through them easily. This is one of the best ways to escape any unit that may be pursuing your lord though. Cavalry, a single large monster by itself, anything your lord may want to get away from. And you can do this over and over again, even with things like skirmish cap, as you'll see me do in a minute. Even if you're constantly getting pursued, there should always be something you can get through. This is why it's important to have a mobile lord. If I was on foot here, it'd be very difficult to escape these three characters pursuing me. I'd be able to run through my units, but they'd be able to reposition and get on the other side of it just as quick as I could run through it. So keep an eye out for lords and heroes meeting up to converge on your one single lord, and if you need a getaway plan, run through your friendly units. Another good way to protect against single entity units coming after your lord, or anything coming after your lord, is a bodyguard of some kind. This is pretty much essential for foot lords, but can be for anyone really. Something like a melee hero that does nothing but stick by your lord's side and tries to protect them from anything that comes after them. Maybe a strong infantry unit like the council guard here. They're unbreakable, they're anti-large, anything that comes after Skrulk they'll be able to deal with. Their only job is to stick by Skrulk and keep him alive. Or skirmish units that can stick by your lord. As these will be very difficult to catch, and if you've got multiple they're even harder to catch all of them. They'll be able to keep constant missile pressure on whatever is pursuing your lord, and that will probably be enough to deter them from pursuing him anymore. So consider a bodyguard, especially effective for those that aren't that good in melee, like wizard lords. Bringing a cheap melee hero that can stick by their side and do damage with them when they find a single target to take on can be very, very effective. And the last few quick tips for your lord's protection. Bring the fastest mount. If you've got a crappy lord who's rubbish in melee, you don't really want them in melee at all probably. So give them the fastest mount so they can avoid everything and simply focus on doing their magical job. Small flying mounts are usually the fastest, like a Pegasus here, but anything with 90 to 110 speed is gonna be the best bet. Sometimes it may just be best to, well, hide. If you don't want the faff of having to worry about a lord, simply pick the cheapest one and whack him in the corner of the map right out the way. It's more of a cheeky trick that will probably just confuse your enemy and make them go, where the fuck is their lord? But it can be really nice not having to worry about your lord dying. And one of the best ways to keep your lord alive is to, well, keep them alive. With good old-fashioned healing. Bring a healing wizard along and simply focus on keeping your lord alive if they should take damage. This can be a great choice for particularly aggressive lords that may need that healing from being in combat so much. So there you go. Hopefully by now you understand the importance of keeping your lord alive for the duration of the battle, or at least most of it. Maybe at the end you can sacrifice them for the greater good. Provided that it wins you the battle, of course. But this honestly is one of the biggest things that makes the difference between a noob and a better player, is how well they can look after their lord and keep them alive. I hope you've enjoyed this, thanks for watching, I will see you in the future.